I could not be more thrilled to be sitting next to Donna Bungard, who's leading the way on disability inclusion for so many folks across the planet. I want to thank you personally for that. I'd like to also honor the memory of our late, great, amazing dear friend, Stephen Tingus, who led up Ideagen Hollywood for us and was such an just ardent advocate for disability and inclusion in Hollywood, and is one of the reasons why I've come to know Donna through a mutual friend in Hollywood. So we want to talk about that. I want to talk about Matt Rose with Snowflake. Matt is also what you referred to as a leader on so many levels. He's led in the federal government. He's leading now at Snowflake. AI, generative AI, and all the things that are associated with that. We can't even keep up. Our brains are at capacity at this moment. But thanks to generative AI, we will have more capacity, actually, which is sort of fun to think about, right? We just heard from Peter Cuneo, who's the gentleman responsible for Spider-Man on the big screen. He's inspired us a lot, and he's talking about leadership and so many other leaders today. But Sergio Fernandez de Cordova, I leave for last. Doesn't mean he's last. It means he's a leader as well. And he is leading the way to change the world at the PVBLIC Foundation here in New York and across the world. They're focused on helping with the global goals and achieving those in, gosh, 7 years. It's not a long time. And there's a lot of work to be done. And he's walking the halls of the UN every day. We heard from ambassadors today and others. And I just want to say thank you to each of you in advance for helping to change the world. We're sitting here live at the NASDAQ. Personally, huge fan, deeply supportive to the NASDAQ for the support of Ideagen and everything that we stand for. And right back at the NASDAQ, we love every single thing that the NASDAQ does. I'd like to ask each of you if you could give a 60-second introduction of who you are. I've tried to do that a bit, but nice to hear in your own words, your organization, and more specifically what your role is. Now, you're leaders, but you have nuanced roles. So, Donna.
Thank you. Well, my name is Donna Bungard. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a 40-something woman with glasses and dark hair. I do that because we should be inclusive as a disability inclusion specialist, running a program that really spans both the inclusion and the technical aspects of accessibility at Indeed.
Awesome. Awesome. Matt.
Yeah, thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to be with all of you today. My name is Matthew Rose, and as George has mentioned, I'm with Snowflake. Specifically at Snowflake, we're mobilizing the world's data and doing so in a true enterprise global scale and supporting all of the SDGs here at the UN. And in particular, many of the partners are at the NASDAQ as well. My charter, my mission at Snowflake is to bring that into the public sector. The public sector within Snowflake includes government, education, regulated markets, and the entire ecosystem around the globe that serve the public sector. Just as a quick point, I want to highlight that every day, 800 million public servants around the world get up to educate, to serve, to protect, and that's a charter that we take very seriously in serving those folks that serve, educate, and protect.
Bravo. Amazing. Yeah. Sergio.
Sergio Fernandez de Cordova. I am the chairman of the PVBLIC Foundation. Started PVBLIC 12 years ago, focused on how we could use media, data, and technology to transform our world. Media to tell stories, data to measure, and technology to actually make sense and build software layers and how we are advancing sustainable development goals, as I've been talking about throughout the day. And in my various capacities, I was, last year I was an ambassador at the UN, a permanent observer, serving 37 countries and around the future of our youth and how the next generation could also play a role. And we lead many programs like Youth Negotiators, where we bring young leaders to sit at the table with global leaders to actually, and teach them about policy, talking about public servants. We need a pipeline of the next generation to actually not point fingers, but be educated and understand what actually goes on behind the scenes. And so a lot of the work that we do is global. And as George said, we literally live in the UN. People say, where's your office? I'm like 45th and 1st. So, you know, we've been doing this work again for many years, and just very excited to be here, George, and thank you for having me.
Well, you know, it's humbling. It's humbling to be sitting next to these folks because I know the work that they're doing is so profound. It's profound on every level. It's humbling to hear from all the folks we heard from today from across sectors, such a diverse group of folks Intentionally so, by the way. It's intentionally so. From the very first day of Ideagen with our late chairman, Louis Stokes, the idea was that we bring folks together that typically are not in a room together. And at first you look at the agenda or you look at the panel and you say, why are these people sitting with each other? And then you realize after, oh, they created a partnership. Oh, they're solving for this or they're solving for that. Or Matt learned something from Sergio or Donna that maybe he didn't know that he now employs in his company that will make the world a better place. And so these are the things that, especially for the young folks out here and that will watch, the millions that will watch this program on Ideagen TV and beyond, I think it's very important to note that this is a learning opportunity. Despite everything we've been through over the past several years with COVID and everything else, proximity is important. Proximity to the leaders, proximity to people who are actually changing the game. Take advantage of these opportunities and learn. And as we heard from Peter Cuneo, you know, when you fail, learn from that and own it. Don't walk away from it. Don't come up with excuses. If something didn't work out, say, yeah, I was responsible for that. Yes, I was. And I'm going to learn and be better. Imagine that. Learn to be better from that. A lot of people have the idea that you fail and then you run away from it, or it wasn't me, or you hide from it. No, lean into it. Lean into failure, and that's why these folks are here. So, Donna, and this is for all of you, Matt, Sergio, what qualities do you believe are the most important when trying to create a strong, diversified, organizational workforce that not only provides for the employees, but also positions the organization for success? This is to all of you, but I know Indeed is sort of leading, right? It's kind of a question geared to you, but I'd love for all of you to answer it.
Well, I'll jump in if that's all right.
Sure.
And thank you for such a great question. We've had study after study show that diverse teams create more innovative results. Mm-hmm. So for organizational success, if we have the diverse teams, that's going to come. That we're not too worried about that. But building that workforce can be a challenge for a lot of organizations. And one of the key ways to bring people in is to give them that sense of belonging. And that means representation at every level of cultural backgrounds, of disability, of age, of gender identification, what have you. It just that great amount of diversity in your marketing, in your leadership, in your talent acquisition processes, all of it. And another piece is that level of accountability that we as leaders need to take on ourselves as to, okay, I'm not familiar with that lived experience, so I need to educate myself, and it's not let me call so-and-so over in this department and ask them about their lived experience. It's on me to find resources and take accountability for that learning, so that way I can better adapt and look at what barriers are there. And each of us taking that on in such a large global organization of what can we, each of us, do to break down barriers and form connections, will create that sense of belonging, will create that opportunity for people to feel the safety to share ideas and bounce off of each other and grow. And it's just really, really exciting to create that culture of respect where people are free to speak and be really heard. And when you get that, you get people drawn to you. And, well, as I said, organizational success happens when that diversity and that belonging happens.
That's right. Matt, do you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And Donna, thank you so much for what you do. We just heard from Peter previously at Marvel as it related to experiences that help create leaders. One thing that really resonated with me was when he talked about military service. And as a result of my own military service over the past 2 decades, I am now dealing with a disability. And I definitely appreciate folks like yourself that are trying to make the workplaces a better place for that community. One thing that we're doing, because we're a technology firm, and as we're trying to, as she put it out, giving the right resources and bringing it to folks where they are at that specific time, is building that into technology solutions. What we understand is that technology at times can be daunting, but it is the future. I had previously noted that since 1946, more than half of the world's GDP has been tied to technology, and I don't think that's going to at any point change. So when we start to bring the power of technology, not only for growth, but also for the people, technology has a way in which we do that. So what we're doing is we're putting into it what I call a translation error, a translation layer. And what that allows is if you know one language, the machines will help it translate into a best language for the performance, and it returns the results back to you. And I think that's an example of again, assisting folks through technology to meet where they are so that they can get the full power of what it brings.
Brilliant.
Love that.
Sergio, did you want to follow up on that?
Absolutely, and you said what are the most important things when creating a strong, diversified organization and workforce, right, that provides the employee but positions the organization for success. And us as a global foundation, what we look for is global diversity, right? So we look at the globe, hiring externally, building across the planet, making sure that we're also building capacity wherever we're actually setting up offices or projects, making sure that there's that educational track so that the next generation workforce, as well as the element of actually, what is their purpose and passion? Because a lot of people go into the nonprofit world, a lot of people go into the NGO world or government world or the UN world for whatever reason, right? Whatever their perceived value proposition is. And for us, if you don't have the purpose and passion, you don't have the fire inside you, then it's not gonna last. And having been doing this already for over a decade, we've noticed that you could actually grab and educate a human, bring them through the journey, and make them into a leader as long as they have the heart and the desire. And you have to have the organization that is equipped to do that as well. And for us, given that we work in a space of humanity is not a transaction. It's how we helping the world be better, how we helping governments do things better, and how we bring in leaders together to educate them on how to make the planet better. So purpose and passion really is at the core.
Purpose and passion. I'd like to add also innovation. So I'd like to ask each of you, maybe we start with Matt, seeing that you've got your finger on the pulse of innovation at Snowflake. How do you infuse the notion, the relative notion of innovation? And we saw and we heard in several presentations from global leaders today even, what that definition looks like. How do you get to innovation? Is it through disruption? Is it through discomfort? But ultimately, let's say you've arrived there. You're innovating. How do you infuse that into your practices?
Through impact. Innovation is nothing without the impact that it receives. And to I think perhaps bring it to light, if I can, just tell a quick story. And many of you probably knew folks that were affected by Hurricane Ian back in 2022. And it touched 8 countries as it came through. It became the third most damaging storm in Florida's history, and many of the other countries that it touched, such as Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, and others, it was just as damaging. When you look at the impact, right, 161 people perished, $113 billion in damages, tens and thousands of homes just in Florida damaged or demolished as a result. And that's showing the impact of the storm. But what we saw through one of our partners, and really bringing it home, was in a company called Merit. Whenever it occurred, the government of Florida turned to data. And the reason they turned to data is because they had a problem. In order to get people the right resources at the right time, at the right place to actually provide that impact to that human being, they determined that it took days and weeks in many cases to find out who they were. So they moved through digital credentialing and was able to bring that days and weeks down to minutes. And they made all the difference. And when you ask about innovation, what they determined at that point and moving forward as it's touching not just the people that were affected by that storm, but many, many, many other folks around the world by storms, is that they determined that the DNA of knowledge was data. But to your point of innovation, how do you span it and control? The way you do it is by understanding the impact of using these technologies for good.
That's right. Do you want to follow up on that?
Absolutely, thank you. We embrace innovation through policy, right? Policy work, and we're looking at where's the future going, data, architecture, quantum, national priorities, and working with the governments. Because the way the world has evolved, it's been really, all surface-based, and nobody's really focusing and giving, 50 years later, which is since 46, so that's 50, 60, 78 years later, we still have countries that are living in the 40s, and companies that are worth $1 trillion. What that tells us is that the innovation exists. Doesn't tell us that they're better than us. It's just that we could use it. We need to educate these governments. So when we look at innovation, we're saying, how are we looking at public policy so that we can open the door for more public-private partnerships we talked about yesterday, right? More public-private partnerships. So that's where technology comes in, because now it gives us an opportunity to scale innovation rapidly and do it in Palau, Marshall Islands, and then give them the tools to actually, and that's one of the things, and talk about what are we doing in technology. We're building data hubs for all the governments. We have 65 governments that we're building out data hubs so that they can understand what beyond GDP is, natural assets measuring, capacity measuring, their balance sheet, if you will, with natural productive capacity. And then basically, how does that enhance our capabilities? Is basically it allows us to then bring them through the journey, advance their evolution from 1946 to 2030, 2040, right? We get a lot of governments that come to us and say, hey, what about AI? Hey, we want to be an AI. I'm like, stop talking about AI right now. Like, you just got cell phones. You just built a data hub, right? Like, let's first look at the policy. Let's look at the educational track. Do we have the ability to educate your community, your country, your people, right? So, okay, let's focus. Right? We're not in the stock market. We don't need to chase AI, right? Like, we're in the actual human capacity building, which is a generational conversation. So to us, we use all the tools. We take the best that we learned from private sector, as we were talking about last night, right? And we bring it to the public sector, and we say, hey, it's being done. Don't point fingers. Let's take action. Let's implement. Let's look at the policy, and let's bring in all the new companies. Let's bring all the new private sector innovators that are ready to take a chance and go to another country and launch their capacities. So that's kind of how we kind of utilize the trifecta.
Well said. Donna, did you want to close on that one?
Absolutely. I love what you said about the educational tracks and all of these pieces. And one of the things that we really need to focus on is making sure people have the ability to be in the room. At Indeed, we have internal business resource groups where we're able to talk to people and learn about the different aspects of what were their barriers, what were their experiences, how can we build upon that to break it down and connect more people to better work to improve their way of life. And there's another piece of that. In the disability rights community, there's a lot of discussion about progress over perfection. But I think that is a key to innovation that builds upon that idea of learning from failure, of just make progress, keep taking actionable steps. And innovation is born from that.
I love that. I think that's incredible. And it's so interesting to hear a great sort of cross-sector conversation on this with you all right here. You've got the UN and an NGO, Snowflake, and Indeed, a few globally leading companies. You're on the pulse of hiring so many millions of people and focused on also that disability inclusion within that pipeline, which is so critical as well. Matt, I'd like to ask you in this look, I think what we understand here is that the world is changing so rapidly. You talk about countries asking about AI, right? It's changing. I mean, our head is spinning. My head is spinning after all these conversations, trying to process where we are on all this stuff and how then it applies. And you know what I think the answer is? We don't know. We don't know yet. I don't even think we can imagine at this moment what the world is going to look like next year, let alone 5 years from now. So talking about the midterms, and I'm not talking about those midterms, the midterms to the global goals here, with 7-ish years to achieve the goals, we're way behind by any metrics. I think I've heard Sergio say we're, increasingly falling behind. And but yet there's goals. So that's why you have goals. You don't always achieve the goals, but you have that North Star, and we know where the issues are. And this data and the acceleration of data is taking us in that direction. So I'd like to ask you, Matt, this technology arena is evolving so rapidly, and you're dealing with public sector clients primarily in your role at Snowflake. You've assisted to run AI cloud for the US government, a very significant role. You've been one of the people responsible for that. Please give us an example of how you've adapted the myriad of these emerging technologies in your role.
Yeah, thank you. So just as you teed it up, what you're really highlighting is that we're entering the era of data. And it's not just within the developed countries, but it's also the developing countries, because what we had discussed previously is that data is now an asset. And we know this intuitively because of the cyber attacks around the world. What are they going after? They're going after the data, right? So it is, if you will, it's the bank heist of our time. But in terms of what you've asked me, and I think it's something that we need to continue to think about as we set global goals, but not lose the perspective of who we're serving. There was a story recently when I was talking to one of our partners, Power School, that highlighted to me a kid that'll go unnamed out in California. And that kid had done great through his K through 12 in the first 2 years. And he was, all marks put aside, specifically in mathematics, was top of his class. Next year, some changes occurred and he was the bottom. And they could not figure out why. And they were trying to figure out while the counselors were talking to the home, they were talking to the family members there, they were talking to the teachers and trying to figure out what was happening. And they put in even interventions into trying to help this kid. And what they found is that the interventions were just not meeting the marks and trying to increase the kid's scores. Through connecting data and data that had not been provided before, specifically out of the transportation, and those artificial intelligence that were helping that transportation district with the school routes, what they determined is that kid, while before had time to get breakfast in the morning that the school had provided, but based off of a change of route was unable. So the kid in this case was choosing, do I go to math class or do I get breakfast in the morning, right? And you think about that, and I think about that quite a bit. With my own background, but not learning in perspective. But what that shows to me is when you start to bring together data and technology, you're able to solve just, again, this kid's life, just one issue, and save a whole lot of money, because those interventions that they have provided that were not successful, right? That's wasteful, that's inefficient. And I think, what that starts to show is we have a goal to improve education. We have a goal to end hunger. We have a goal of ending poverty. And this kid, was experiencing just at that micro level all three of those national goals. And what we had shown is that through the technology, it's possible to improve not only a kid's life, but also achieve in a small scale those SDGs.
Incredible. And we're going to enter a little bit of a lightning round to ensure that we are able to ask you the question and stay on time, which is always important. And I'd like to ask you, Donna, you're working on inclusivity. You're at Indeed. A lot of the folks know globally what Indeed is. You help connect the job seekers with the employers, et cetera. And so what's an example of an inclusive impact statement? Where have you helped a company or entity become more inclusive?
I think there's a lot of things that Indeed I'm really proud of. But one of the things I'd love to highlight would be at our marquee event in Atlanta last month, that team, I should say, infused inclusion into every aspect, from the content to the speakers, to the venue, to the food, to making sure there were sensory deprivation areas, to warnings if there's flashing lights or loud noises. Every little detail was built around being inclusive, so that not only were we being inclusive as an entity to all the people who were showing up, but there were thousands of people and leaders of different organizations noticing and walking away wanting to do more at their organizations. And I think that chain reaction, that impact, people, when they heard Haben Girma speak about what are you inspired to do? And I think they really took that away with them. Mm-hmm. And I think that was huge, huge levels of impact. And that's just one event.
But it's a great example, because you're saying that is exactly how the organization, you're setting the tone. And you're leading by example. Isn't that the example?
That is the example.
Public foundation. Sergio, the foundation's having so much impact globally. What do you see as the greatest impact?
The greatest impact I believe that we're currently working on is really the evolution of data, working with the governments on natural capital, understanding, as you articulated, something that it's data as an asset class it's the next future. When you talk about the next 10, 20 years, it's going to rewrite history. And what we need to do, talking about inclusion, is we need to make sure that everybody understands how to be part of that evolution, not just us here in the US, but how do we open the doors and actually create that inclusion so we don't have issues down the road. The biggest issues that we have, we're looking at the anniversary of the UN on Tuesday. One of the events that we're hosting is talking about the least developed and underserved communities. And we actually asked the UN to change their narrative on celebrating their birthday to focus on those communities, because if we're not, then what are we doing, right? Because we're not going to have peace. We're going to have lack of security. The world's going to be upside down. It doesn't matter if you're developed or undeveloped. And we're already seeing it. So, technology plays a big role. Data is going to play the biggest role. And the future wars are not going to be on territory. They're going to be around data. And it's already 75% of the UN countries want no shared data. So the solutions need to come quickly. And, for us, that's really the most important thing. And it's really, what we're head down working on and building across and bringing the right stakeholders together with the right policy.
Incredible. Well, I'd like to go lightning, final call to action for our global audience.
Keep an open mind, keep bringing more voices to the table, and make sure that when we are looking at hiring, when we're looking at inclusion, when we're looking at all of these things, that they really come together into creating these really innovative workforces.
Beautiful.
As we mobilize the world's data, look for the impact. Look at where we can have the most impact with that data.
I think it's more of a call to action to folks and saying, you all could do something. Everybody here in this room, as it was said before, have an opportunity to do something, help include someone, find a strategy, an opportunity. Every single day we could actually change someone's lives every single day. So that's Ideagen.
And that's the final word.
You.
That's Ideagen. That's public. Snowflake. Indeed. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Thank you.